Going beyond the headlines. Asking the questions you want answered. Exploring government policies and how they impact you. We are delving deeper.
Good evening and welcome to Delving Deeper. I am your host, Ayana Carter. Joining us this evening is retired Major General Rodney Smart. He is the Chief Executive Officer of the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management.
Good evening, Ayana, and good evening to your viewing and listening audience. Thank you for having me once again.
Despite it being the rainy and hurricane seasons, we have seen some high temperatures. Yes. What effect does this have on Trinidad and Tobago and the ODPM?
If we can look first at what is causing the high temperatures, and what we are recognizing for a fact is that climate change is impacting our society. And in addition to the changing climate that we are experiencing, this year we have been told by our Met Service that there is the phenomena called El Nino. And what happens in a year when there is an El Nino situation is that you have hotter air and drier conditions. And last year, when we would have had La Nina, where it would have been wetter, this time around, we have these dry conditions. And interlinked with climate change, you have around this time of the year, usually, one of our highest temperature periods. What we are experiencing is these very high temperatures. And it is important that we pay attention to what these effects are. Because, we are people who work in the sun. We play in the sun. But because of the types of temperatures we're having, we need to be more careful. We need to pay attention to our health, the health issues, as well as to those persons who naturally are vulnerable in these kinds of situations. Our aged parents, our young children. We have heard about instances where people left children in vehicles, not in Trinidad and Tobago, thank God. And therefore, all these types of things we have to be so very mindful of, recognizing that it is not business as usual, but the high temperatures are impacting on our society and it is impacting on our people. We have to be careful.
Yeah, and we're speaking of climate change. How has the ODPM been preparing Trinidad and Tobago for the effects of climate change?
Climate change, in terms of preparation, thankfully, is not just the ODPM. It's a number of government agencies that are involved in climate change. The leading agency is the Ministry of Planning and Development. The ODPM is a support agency. And the ministry is executing the climate change policy that was developed in 2011. And the ODPM, being one of the support agencies, driving it as well. So when we look at climate change, we look at climate change from the perspective of disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation. And the work that we have been doing is in partnership with the Ministry of Planning and Development, but also other agencies. So a few weeks ago, in fact in July, the ODPM would have partnered with the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, and another agency is Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency. And we would have had in Trinidad and Tobago a regional conference that looked at how do you marry the risk from disasters and the risk from climate change. And coming out of that conference, we're looking to work with the Ministry of Planning and Development to have a national adaptation plan that takes into consideration not just areas such as mitigation, climate adaptation, but how do our traditional disaster risks are now being influenced by these climate changes? So in addition to the National Adaptation Plan, we have in Trinidad and Tobago a National Disaster Prevention and Preparedness Multisectoral Committee. And through that committee, we will be working to ensure that Trinidad and Tobago various sectors, our communities, become more disaster resilient, but at the same time, climate risk resilient.
Okay. And earlier this year, we saw some flooding events taking place in parts of the country. Now, what is the role of the ODPM when flooding events like that happen in Trinidad and Tobago?
It all depends on the level of flooding. If the flooding is at a local level, we have the disaster management units of the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, as well as in Tobago, we have the Tobago Emergency Management Agency. Once it is at the level where they are able to manage it, what we call the local or the subnational level, they manage it. But if it is that the flooding event is catastrophic, it is across our entire society, then the ODPM may be asked to become involved and to assist in the operations. And when the ODPM becomes involved at this stage, we consider it to be a national level crisis. And the ODPM would bring together other agencies to support those two agencies I just spoke about. So through the processes that we have, you may see private sector organizations becoming involved, but more so from the public sector perspective, you would see the Defense Force get involved, because the Defense Force has an engineer battalion, but they also have the Coast Guard, they have the Air Guard, and all these resources at a national level will be brought to bear on the situation that is unfolding.
Yeah.
In fact, last year, in 2022, that kind of operation eventually evolved in the Bamboo No. 2 village. It didn't start off like that, but once the local authorities said they needed support, the ODPM got involved and assisted the disaster management units of the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government to coordinate the operations. And that's what the ODPM does well, help coordinate. But there's also another thing we do. The ODPM has what we call the National Strategic Reserves for logistics. And if it is that there are other resources are needed, the ODPM will bring those resources to bear on the problem. But I also like to add to that what we consider to be level 3. But I just spoke about there is level 1, 2, and 2. But at level 3, which means that our country needs additional resources, the ODPM role is to reach out to the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency. And through that CARICOM approach, bring in other resources from the region and external of the region. So I mentioned previously the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. And that office will be providing support, the United Nations Development Program, as well as our embassies, because we have a very close relationship with the embassies in Trinidad and Tobago. And they too will get involved once we reach a level 3. And there's a need for regional and international support. So the ODPM acts as the coordinator once we have to respond to a flood. But the ODPM role also goes beyond just the response, because after the response, we have to recover our country. And again, through those mechanisms, the ODPM will play a pivotal role.
Okay. And I know you mentioned at levels 2 and 3, government agencies and ministries helping to mitigate the situation and bring relief and support. What about any other stakeholders? I know you mentioned the embassies just a little while ago and the CARICOM agencies as well. But are there any other stakeholders that the ODPM may engage with in terms of mitigating disaster and assisting in relief?
Okay, so if I respond to that question from the level 1, that really is where a number of our local agencies are involved. So once the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government requires assistance, they first will reach out to the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service. They will reach out to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. They will also reach out to their stakeholders in the private sector. And because it is a local situation, persons and agencies in a corporation. But once it goes beyond their capacity, which we consider the level 2, that's where the ODPM move from monitoring and providing support in the background to actually be more present, because here's where they have asked for assistance. And at that level, the ODPM has developed a wonderful partnership with the private sector, and as well as NGOs. So NGOs as well get involved. And we saw that in Bamboo, we saw it in Mayaro last year, in Manzanilla, where we would have spoken to some of the agencies, and we would have said to them, given the situation, can you help provide meals for these communities? And those NGOs got involved. The Red Cross Society got involved. ITNAC is there, not a cause. Say what TT got involved. So we have this approach, I often say, we act like a maestro in an orchestra, and we making sure, using that baton, bring all these national agencies together. So as we build from level 1 to level 2 to level 3, those are the kinds of agencies that would be involved. But I should also mention the faith-based organizations, because in addition to Say What Titi, the Adventist Development Response Network also get involved. Living Waters, the Catholic religion, they too get involved. So we have in Trinidad and Tobago a network of agencies that are always working to support our society. And this is in a flood event, but it also applies to other hazards we may face. For example, if we have an earthquake or a tsunami. So there's a strong network that the ODPM and the other disaster management agencies have developed to help our society overcome any challenges we may face.
Yeah, so it really sounds like a true multi-sectoral assistance. That approach is wide and far-reaching.
Yes, and we like to call it the whole of society approach, because it moves beyond whole of government to involving all these other agencies, and who are always ready and willing to help, whether you faith-based, whether you are non-governmental organization. Fortunately for us, we have agencies in Trinidad and Tobago who are always willing to assist. And this extends not just in Trinidad and Tobago, but in the region, because the ODPM, Trinidad and Tobago, through the ODPM, is responsible for 3 other countries under the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency setup. And those other countries are Grenada, Guyana, and Suriname. And when those countries are impacted, as they sometimes are, the ODPM, again, through that whole network I just described there, get these agencies together. TIMA in Tobago, get the Tobago agencies together. And we are able to supply our neighbors with whatever assistance they need. The last bit of assistance we would have provided would have been to Suriname, and that would have been in 2021 when they had the huge floods down there. Yes.
Yeah. So, Major General, in June, just in June this year, the Minister of National Security would have launched the Community Flood Early Warning System project.
Yes.
Now, what is the intent behind this project?
The Community Flood Early Warning System is intended to empower communities to become more resilient against flooding. That's the main intent. The ODPM a few years ago would have approached the United Nations Development Program, UNDP. And in discussion, we would have said to them, one of the things we've observed is our communities are stressed whenever we have extreme rainfall. That stress comes from riverine flooding, sometimes comes from flash flooding. And we want to enhance a system that the Water Resources Agency of WASA has in place. And that system is a number of gauges that they have placed in our rivers so that we are able to monitor the level of the rivers. But not just monitor the level, to be able to take action if we realize that those rivers are going to overspill their banks. That is the core of the program, using technology to help communities become more knowledgeable, become more aware, and to help themselves in the event that they have a challenge in their community. We want to stress that phase 1 of the program ended, and that is what the minister would have launched. And we're going into a second phase. And what we would like is that community persons becoming, residents become involved with your disaster management units. And each corporation has a disaster management unit. And these community flood early warning systems come under them for daily management. But in addition to the technology, you need people to respond and help vulnerable persons in their community. And they have developed a system called the Community Emergency Response Teams that work with the technology so that persons who need assistance could get it early. And if there's a need to evacuate, again, through the technology, they are able to do so. The same thing happens in Tobago, because 2 rivers in Tobago also receive the devices. And they have developed their system around the Tobago Emergency Management Agency. So as we move from phase 1 into phase 2, I would want to say to communities, keep getting involved, because you don't want to wait until the river overspill its bank to start taking action. If you use the information that is there, it helps you, it helps your family, it helps businesses in the area, and it helps Trinidad and Tobago to become more resilient. The Ministry of Works and Transport and the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government has a job to do in terms of making sure our rivers and waterways remain clear, and that it could take the increased amount of water that is coming in our channels. That is something that they have a responsibility for. But at the same time, as your residents, we too have a responsibility, especially to those who are vulnerable, so that the community can continue in the event that you have a challenge. And one of the biggest challenges we're realizing that we are having in our country is the whole idea of the flooding hazard. You know, because of climate change again, there is more frequent and more intense rainfall. In fact, there's extremes of everything. There's extreme of heat, there's extreme of rainfall, and sometimes there's even extremes of high winds. And because of that, our societies have to become more prepared. And persons have to, become more their brother's keeper. Because we always have to be preparing ourselves for the day when something really catastrophic happens. And it's these small incidents that builds the capacity and builds the network and the unity among communities.
How can persons get involved with their communities? Where do they have to go? Who can they contact?
With regard to the Community Emergency Response Teams, CERT teams, so let's start first in Tobago. That is run by the Tobago Emergency Management Agency. And if you go to their website, you will get the information on what you can do to enroll. Similarly in Trinidad, in this case, the disaster management units of the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, on their website, you will find the information. But the ODPM also has a volunteer program. So if an individual prefers to work with the ODPM encourages persons to get involved. Now, what the ODPM volunteer program does is again similar to the ODPM as the National Strategic Office for Disaster Management. If those local level CERTs require assistance, we provide our volunteers as surge troops that will strengthen whatever they are doing. So you always have this surge capacity that is going to help what we have at the local level before we even have to consider bringing in regional or international support. So go to the websites of the ODPM, go to the website of Disaster Management Units, go to the website of TIMA. All of them, there's information there that you can provide. But if you want to call the officers. Call the officers, and they will provide you with the information. But get involved. You know, at this point in time, we are at the peak of the hurricane season. In fact, the peak of the hurricane season is around September the 10th. So we are closing in on that. And as we reach the peak, one of the things that we can say for certain is that the latter part of the hurricane season has brought a lot more rain over the past few years. Right now, as we're speaking, Hurricane Lee is strengthening in the Atlantic Ocean. And therefore, it is important that people jump ahead of the hazard and become part of your community response.
Now, Major General Smart, you said that we're entering the second phase of the hurricane season. What advice would you have for the members of the public during this time?
I would say start with your home, start with the personal things around you. So when we say the personal things, we always advise the members of the public that you should always consider having a grab-and-go bag in the event that you have to evacuate. We tie that in with saying, know the risk that you have around your home. So know your risk is one of the things that we like to emphasize. So your home may have certain risks. For example, if it is that because the rain has been falling, you may have leaves in your gutter. Clean out the leaves, clear it out. You may realize that you have storm drains around your home that need cleaning and clearing. You may find that one of the things that people do is that they have loose items around the home. Those loose items could become missiles. Educate your family too. So the second thing we like to say is develop a plan. Develop an emergency plan for your family, for your friends. Make sure that you share your number, your telephone number, with persons who you trust. Develop a WhatsApp group in your community so that persons can share information. And you too must develop a personal plan for your home in the event that, for example, you have to evacuate, persons know where we're going to meet. So have a thorough plan. Resource. Get your resources. Put your resources in that grab-and-go bag. There are items that you may need for young children. Let's not wait until the challenge is before us. If we plan, we are going to execute so much better and put less stress and strain on the national resources. And the final thing we like to advise from the ODPM is take action. Take action, get involved in your community, get your community involved as well. Don't wait for the storm to happen. And we have had tropical storms. In fact, the last one we had to respond to, if I'm not wrong, would have been Karen in 2019. So we have tropical storms that impact. While we haven't been impacted by a hurricane for some time, the things that start off as tropical depressions eventually became hurricanes up north. Yeah. And therefore, in a community mode, make sure that there are those things in the community that are at risk. Don't wait. If it is that you see that there's something in a community that needs fixing, get involved and fix it. Find a way. Get businesses in the community involved as well. Because the strength of a national system is the strength of its communities. So those are the things that we like to emphasize at the ODPM. And the final thing I will say is keep in touch with the local authorities, the national and local authorities. So because we're speaking about hurricanes and because we're speaking about the rainy season, the Met Office The Met Office is our censor agency that provides information to the society. Listen to what the Met Office says. Sometimes we have people who come up with all different theories about what is happening. Go to the Met Office website, see what they say, and enroll yourself, because you can enroll with the Met Office to get updates as well.
Yeah.
So information is critically important as well.
And not just information from credible sources.
From credible sources. Thank you. I can say better.
When you were last here in October, the ODPM was planning to launch the Public Alert Notification System. Now that has since been launched. What sort of response have you been receiving from the public on the system?
If you allow me to first speak about the system for those persons who are not aware. So the Public Alert Notification System, or what we like to call the PANS, right, emblematic of our national instrument, for people to remember, and I emphasize that. We use that acronym, PANS, is supposed to spark people's memory in the event that they need to get support or to get information. And the Public Alert Notification System is a mass notification system where once the ODPM receives information of a critical hazard, and I stress on the word critical, it is not for the everyday challenge our society faces, but something that is critical. For example, a hurricane.
Mm-hmm.
We will send out a message through the Public Alert Notification System to our society. In addition to that, if it's something that has happened suddenly, for example, an earthquake, we would send out information. And when I say earthquake, I don't mean one of the minor earthquakes, a serious earthquake. Yeah. We would send out information. So the Public Alert Notification System is designed to provide our society with early warning. So it's part of our national early warning system. And I want to take this opportunity to encourage more people to sign up. We've had a wonderful increase in numbers, but still there's too many people in our society who need to be on the platform. And I want to use this opportunity, as I'm here today, to encourage people to go to the ODPM website and sign up. There's an app, there's an Everbridge app. Everbridge is the organization we're working in partnership with. You could download the app, or if you wish, you go to the ODPM website and the information will be provided on how you can register. Very simple. There's a video, it shows you all the steps. And for those persons who have registered so far, I want to say thank you. But we need more people. We want our whole society to be on the Public Alert Notification System.
Yeah. And what can we expect from the ODPM in the coming year?
Oh, the ODPM is doing quite a number of things at this point in time. With regard to the agencies, I mentioned the National Disaster Prevention and Preparedness Workshop, Multisectoral Committee. And what they do, that committee does, is in the month prepare for the beginning of the hurricane season. Throughout the year, they're doing various things. One of the things that we're doing right now is what they call a risk information exchange platform, where various agencies would be providing information that could better inform Trinidad and Tobago of its disaster risk. What are the things that could challenge our businesses? What are the things that can challenge our communities? What are the things that could challenge our economy? What are the things that could challenge our environment? Mm-hmm. So this is a macro database that we're developing. And that database, using artificial intelligence, will help us determine where are our greatest risks and where we need to place our scarce resources to buttress those areas against the risks that we face. So that's one of the projects we're excited about. We are also right now in discussions with the Caribbean Development Bank where we're hoping in partnership with the Ministry of Planning and Development to do what is known as a national risk assessment for disasters, a national disaster risk assessment, where alongside that risk information platform, we are able to see where our greatest weaknesses are. And we are able now to place focus on that. We're able now to stratify for it, strategize for it, but also stratify for it in deciding which of the agencies are best to tackle those problems that we are facing. So this is a very comprehensive program that we're hoping to kick off very soon once we get the support of the Caribbean Development Bank. So far, it looks very positive, so hopefully we'll get that. So that's 2 projects. A third project that we're working on is what is known as the Caribbean Risk Information Tool. We're doing that in partnership with the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency. And that goes down to the community level, where what I spoke about was at the national level. The risk information tool is at the community level. And right now, they're about to launch a pilot where 2 communities are going to be selected. And that tool is going to help us understand the risk at the community level. And again, similar to what I said before, develop strategies and to stratify which of our institutions are best to deal with the challenges that we face. So quite a lot is happening in the environment that we operate in, and all for the good of Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah, it sounds like the ODPM has a very full schedule for the next year.
And those are the 3 main ones, but we have quite a few things happening right now. You know, one of the things that is always of concern to us is the earthquakes and tsunamis, because sometimes they come together. And because of the devastation they cause, because of the lives that could be lost, we are soon going to be meeting with a pilot with the Woodbrook community, because we had a study done of Port of Spain and the impact that a serious earthquake could have on Port of Spain. And we are in the process, beginning with Woodbrook, meeting the residents and speaking to them about some of the findings of this study. We've done this with the response agencies already. They are preparing themselves in the event something should happen. But at the same time, we need now to meet with the residents. Our final project I will speak about is our volunteers. They will not forgive me if I don't speak about a program that they are having soon. They are planning right now a survival camp for the members, and that will take place next month in October. And they're all excited about it because they see it as one of the avenues to train them to respond in a time of disaster, but also to help our country recover. We have some very eager volunteers, and I want to applaud them for it, as I am on set right now.
All right. Now, you've given us a lot of food for thought, but do you have any final thoughts that you could give the public?
I would want to say to Trinidad and Tobago that we are at a point in our history and in our development where, unless we take seriously the challenges we face from disasters, the challenges that we face from climate change, unless we take seriously those effects that we can suffer, our society, like many other societies that we have seen, could come under extreme challenges. The threats are real, and therefore now is the time for us to start in our homes, in our sports clubs, in our communities, in our churches, mandirs, temples, mosques, bringing people together and paying greater attention to disasters. In the same way how we focus on other aspects of our private life and our community life, disasters are now very prevalent. We have been spared, thankfully, but we must not become complacent and take it for granted. So my message to Trinidad and Tobago is to please let us jump ahead of the curve, because it certainly will happen to our society as it is happening everywhere. I would also like to say to my staff, as well as all the persons who are involved in disaster management, thank you for the job that you're doing. It is a thankless job. It is a job where 8 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock in the night, 2 o'clock in the morning, you're going to get a call, something is happening, and you have committed to respond. And I want to say thank you for that service. That's national service.
Yeah.
The service that you give to our country, as well as the service that you give to our region.
Yeah. So God is a Trini, but we still need to be prepared.
Well, God is a Trini too, but he's also a Grenadian, a Guyanese, etc. So we don't have exclusive rights to him, right? And therefore, he will expect us to prepare.
Yeah. All right. And that's our show. Thank you, Retired Major General Rodney Smart, for joining us on this week's episode of Delving Deeper.
Thank you very much for having me. And to the crew that supported us, thank you. They've been wonderful.
Yes. So join us again at this same time next week for another episode of Delving Deeper. I am your host, Ayana Carter, and from all of us here, have a good night.